we're gonna go on to what crafts can you create with beeswax. So today I showed you one of 1,000 examples. And so I do wanna pass around this honey crafting book. This is my favorite book for a beginning person that wants to get into honey or beeswax crafting. So it's a book that has all sorts of great recipes for what to use with honey as far as at-home products. So it has, for example, some really great like body scrubs, sugar facial scrub with honey, for example, and it has pictures. You can't make anything if it doesn't have a picture, right? How are you supposed to know what it's supposed to look like at the end, right? So you have to have pictures, but it also has a lot of honey crafting for the kitchen. So what can you do with honey in the kitchen? So it has everything from honey butter recipes to glazes for meats and glazes for carrots and desserts and things I can't pronounce, and berry fruit dip and oatmeal peanut butter and honey cookies, all sorts of stuff in this recipe book. But it has a lot of things you can do with beeswax besides cosmetics. So it has recipes for various soaps. You can make soaps with like a glycerin base or soaps with a lye base if you're a little more comfortable with that. It also has recipes for candles, how to make candles like this one here that is like a rolled honeycomb print candle. And it has recipes for a variety of different cosmetics, just all sorts of stuff. And the pictures are beautiful, and it has all sorts of oil and beeswax on it, so forgive me for that, but that means it's been used. So pass it around and take a look at it. That's something I purchased at Barnes & Noble, but it's also something you can get online. But I really like that book because it also has safety tips in it, as well as just some general tips and tricks for how to be successful when using beeswax. So that's something that I have found helpful. Other things and here behind this slide is a picture of some of the promotional items for the craft products, the cosmetic products that the Boise State students have made. So again, you guys can come up afterwards and sample those if you would like. But some other things that you can make that aren't in that book specifically, you can use, and people have been using it for centuries probably, beeswax can be used as a finisher for wood or a conditioner for wood. It adds a real nice sheen to it as well as moisture and a long-lasting condition for wood to keep it in good shape. So people use it for cabinets and chairs and tables and all sorts of woodwork products. You can also use it to lubricate sticky doors and other things that squeak. You might try that instead of WD-40 next time. You can use it for ski and snowboard wax, for example. There's just a lot of things that you can do with beeswax that's really wonderful. And this book here touches on a lot of the at-home stuff you could do, but people can get really creative. So those are a few examples. Some general tips and tricks. So I have tried and I have failed at beeswax crafting. So definitely wanting to share a few of those things that I have learned so that you all can be successful when you're working with beeswax. So a couple of things that I would suggest. One of them being that beeswax is precious. Don't ever throw it away. Even the dirtiest of beeswax, stuff that looks really dark, can be filtered and cleaned and used for a lot of wonderful products. So if you're a beekeeper and you have frames that they're starting to build up really dark beeswax on it, scrape it off and still use it. It's really good for a lot of projects. So it's very precious, so I encourage you to treat it with that. And a fun fact about how much work it takes to make beeswax: bees may fly 150,000 miles to create just 1 pound of beeswax. So during the height of the summer, there may be upwards of 60 to 70,000 bees in a hive. So all of them working, they'll travel about 150,000 miles to just make 1 pound of beeswax, which is crazy to think about. So that's how much work goes into just a little bit of beeswax. So take care when you're heating it as well. If you overheat beeswax, it can cause a flame, which is why we use it for candles. It does ignite, so you want to be careful with it. I suggest always heating beeswax in a double boiler rather than an oven, because an oven being an enclosed space, the fumes from it can even catch flame, and so it can be a lot more dangerous in an oven. I do have beekeeper friends, and I have heated and melted beeswax in an oven successfully, but it is a lot more dangerous. So I definitely suggest the double boiler route. Beeswax burns at about 400 degrees. So a double boiler is a really nice way to heat it slowly. And you know in a double boiler, it's not going to get hotter than the water boiling point because it's only hitting that water boiling. So it's a lot safer. You never, ever, ever want to put beeswax in a pot on direct heat. It'll get too hot. So definitely take care when you're heating it. Wax can be really hard to clean off, so make sure that you're being careful as you're moving it. It is as liquid as water when it's hot. So make sure when you're churning with it, you're not sloshing it around because it will burn skin. It will be really hard to scrape off your floors, especially out of all the little grooves. Take my word for it. Again, don't use direct heat. That can be very dangerous, and protect your work surfaces. So make sure that you can avoid a lot of cleanup by doing this very trick that I did here, by just putting something down that you can throw away at the end of the night. Have some paper towels or some napkins on hand. Beeswax also does cool quite quickly. You can see at the edge of this container that it's already started to cool. So I'm going to use my rubber spatula to just scrape down the sides. So that way when I remelt this, it will all be in the bottom. All right, and dedicate equipment for wax use only. I mentioned that at the beginning, but I think you'll find that you won't want to use some of the things that have touched wax with food because it's really hard to clean wax totally off of the equipment that you're using. So dedicating it for wax use only will definitely pay off. So with that in mind, don't go out and buy nice stuff. Use the stuff that you have around the house that maybe you're not using for other things. So that is the formal part of the presentation, but if any of you have questions, I'd love to answer them, keeping in mind that I haven't tried out every crafting recipe that's ever existed. So I can certainly guide some of your questions, maybe answer some of them, but maybe give you some resources for where to find those answers. You're also welcome to come up and sample some of these products if you're interested. So any questions? Yes?
When I've bought it before, it's been in little pellets.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So she mentioned that when she's bought beeswax before, it comes in little pellets or almost like flakes. The reason, and that's beneficial, I would prefer to buy it that way because it melts so much quicker when it's in little tiny pieces than when it's in a big block. So that's why they sell it that way, so that it makes it easier, because with almost any beeswax craft, you're going to melt it down and reshape it. So that just makes that melting process go a lot quicker. Yes?
When you filter it the second time, can you pour it into like a little mold or something like that instead of the paper cup?
You could. So the question was, when you filtered the second time through pantyhose, can you just pour it directly into a mold? The answer is definitely yes, although it's a little tricky. So if you wanted to make something like this, for example, like a candle, and you had the mold, it would be hard to stretch the mold or stretch the pantyhose over that mold and get it into the mold. So it depends on what you would be pouring it into. If you were pouring it into like just a candle, like a cylinder-shaped candle mold, that would be a lot easier. But if you're trying to make something smaller and more flat, it would be harder to do both things in the same step. Although what you could do is put it into you could stretch pantyhose over something like this, for example, and then while it's still melted, you could re-pour it into a mold. So that would be an option for molding it without having to remelt it. Yes, sir?
What do you make the molds out of, and how hard is it to get it out?
I've never made molds for beeswax before. You usually buy them. I think they're usually made of like a pretty thick rubber, but that's still flexible. So I've never made one before because I don't have the equipment to do that. But you can buy beeswax molds and just molds in general in all shapes and sizes in the craziest shapes you've ever seen on the internet. You can get ones that look like bees, ones that look like hexagons, ones that look like bears, ones that look like beehives. They come in all shapes and sizes. So you can get them online, and you can usually find pretty good deals if you do some shopping around. Yes, sir?
What is the type of vitamin E that you're using, and what is the
Great question. So he asked what type of vitamin E I use, and to be honest, I just use the one that I could get at my local grocery store. This is a vitamin E that I actually had on hand that I put on a scar that I had to help it heal a little bit better. And vitamin E is a really nice oil that is good for your skin. And so to put it in cosmetics just gives another beneficial factor to the cosmetic. So that's why I use vitamin E. And it's really smooth and a nice clean oil. It's not gritty at all. So it works really well in hand creams and lip balms.
Non-GMO?
Not necessarily. There are options to buy non-GMO of almost all of these items if you want, but you usually pay a premium for that. That's not something that I'm really specific about, so this is just a general one that I got at a grocery store.